Imagine this. Your own father drives you into the storm, strips you of your phone, your money, your very name, and leaves you alone in the freezing rain, calling it a lesson. Most daughters would break, but not Madison Hayes, because the night she was abandoned was the night a hidden truth surfaced, a truth powerful enough to tear an empire apart. What would you do if the person meant to protect you became the one determined to destroy you? Stay with me, because this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about family, power, and survival. I am Madison Hayes, 27, only daughter of a family everyone in Boston swears they know. People see our last name on construction cranes and glass towers and imagine warmth, dinners with sweeping harbor views, parents who clap when their kid comes home with good news. They don't see the quiet rules taped to the inside of my life, curfews enforced like bylaws, spreadsheets for my spending. Updates that felt less like conversation and more like depositions. They don't hear my father's voice when the doors click shut and the smile leaves his face. My mother, Evelyn, died 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer took her fast 8 months from diagnosis to silence. Grief split the house in two. The rooms she loved and the rooms we avoided so we wouldn't see her ghost. After the funeral, my father, Richard Hayes, put on a darker suit, a harder jaw, and never took either off. He told everyone he was stepping up. What he really did was tighten every screw he could find. If love was control, then we were drowning in it. Hayes Development Group, his empire, our legacy started as a crew and a rented truck. He built it into a juggernaut. Commercial campuses, sky lobbies with living walls, polished marble that made your footsteps sound expensive. In this world, my last name opened doors and locked others. I wanted environmental law. He wanted another Hayes in the boardroom. We compromised the way children compromise with weather. I graduated from Harvard in finance, summa cum laude, and took a corner of the 20th floor that came with a view and a microscope. I still tried to be the daughter who earned praise. I brought home wins like a kid brings home art from school, sweaty with hope, taped to the fridge of his approval. The praise never came. Instead, there were lessons. At 16, after I came home 20 minutes late from a birthday dinner, he left me at a ski resort, with no phone and no cash. Problem, solving builds character. He said when I finally stumbled through the front door 2 days later with dishwater on my hands and blisters where my boots had rubbed my ankles raw. At 20, when I questioned a risky acquisition at a family dinner, he canceled my cards. Liquidity is a privilege, he said. He called them lessons. They felt like punishments that wore a suit. There was one person my father didn't pick for me. Ethan Ward. He's 35, former Army Ranger, the kind of tall that makes rooms look smaller. He moves like the floor belongs to him, but he's letting it borrow him for a minute. Ethan was my late uncle's doing Samuel Montgomery, my mother's big brother, the only family member who could get my father to lower his voice. Before Uncle Sam died of a heart attack, he hired Ethan to watch over me quietly. For safety, he said. And we both knew he meant more than security doors and late-night parking garages. Ethan blended into the edges of my days by the elevator bank at closing time, across the cafe when I met a friend. I used to roll my eyes at the idea of a shadow. Then I learned how dark homes can get when certain lights go out. On the morning everything snapped, Boston was all glass, and Sunday, the boardroom on 30 was a terrarium of power. 12 leather chairs, a table that looked pressed from a single tree, and a skyline that made you feel important and small at the same time. I had spent weeks building my proposal. Cedar-certified campuses, electrified systems, long horizon returns that didn't set the planet on fire to keep the lobby warm. I knew my numbers. I knew my why. Good morning, I started, and my voice didn't shake. I walked them through tenant demand curves, rent premiums for high-efficiency builds, the wait lists, the insurers, the incentives, every lever that matters when you're talking to people who only trust math. Slides clicked forward. Heads tilted. Angela Brooks, our CFO, kept nodding quick, clean nods that said she'd checked my work and found the arithmetic sober. Harold Thompson, who's been on our board longer than I've been alive, took notes with the kind of pen you inherit. Even Victor Huang, professional neutral, watched the ROI graph without his usual bored blink. I felt something I hadn't felt in years in that room. Oxygen. And then my father cleared his throat. "That's enough, Madison." His tone wasn't loud. But volume is a blunt instrument. He prefers scalpels. He didn't look at me. He looked at the table as if he were addressing a stain. While I appreciate the enthusiasm, this demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of our business model. Dudder. I smiled the way you do when a stranger bumps you on the sidewalk, a reflexive apology for occupying space. With respect, the data, he said, and smiled the way a wolf might smile at a glass door. We build what clients need, not chase fads pitched by consultants in earth-tone blazers. 78% of our surveyed tenants said they'd pay a premium for reduced operating costs and a smaller carbon footprint, I said, advancing to the slide before he could stop me. This isn't a fad, it's demand. Angela spoke. The methodology is sound, Richard. We tested the projections. Harold cleared his throat. A pilot would be prudent. My father's jaw worked. The room went quiet in the careful way rooms do when expensive men are getting angry. He kept his eyes on the board, not on me, as if addressing me directly would give me too much weight. We don't run this company on surveys, we set markets. If Madison wants to indulge idealism, nonprofits are hiring. The word idealism snapped something brittle inside me. I thought of my mother's hands in our kitchen, all of my uncle's grin when he told me Ethan would make sure men in suits didn't mistake your quiet for weakness. I thought of the nights I stayed late building out sensitivity analyses while the city went home. My ears burned. I swallowed it. Swallowing it is an art. Table it for further review, he said, and everyone knew further review meant drift until it died. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped. Palms found shoulders in polite sympathy. Angela squeezed my arm, a brief human pressure that nearly undid me. I stayed standing longer than I needed to, like a boxer who refuses the stool. Only after the door clicked shut behind the last director did my father look at me. He set his pen down as if it had offended him. "Come with me this afternoon," he said. "If you're intent on research, we'll visit a site." "Which one?" I asked, forcing my voice to be a hallway, not a fist. "Westbrook." He named a forgotten parcel 30 miles out. It wasn't on my list. It didn't matter. With my father, logistics are often camouflage. "Is that necessary?" He smiled without warmth. "Are you questioning me again?" Every nerve in my body wanted to say yes. Every lesson in my life had taught me what no cost with him. "No," I said, "I'll rearrange my afternoon." 2 hours later, I climbed into his black Mercedes. The city slid off our shoulders like a coat brick to trees, glass to gray. Clouds stacked in the distance, the sky threatening rain the way a man threatens calmly. A promise, not a possibility. We drove in a silence that hummed with all the things we weren't saying. My phone sat face down in my lap like a witness. He took an exit I didn't recognize. "Westbrook's the other way," I said, soft. He didn't answer. The first fat drops hit the windshield, and the wipers started their metronome. Barns appeared where billboards should have been. The GPS would have been helpful, but he killed the screen with a tap, and our route shrank to 2 lanes and a line of trees that looked like a jury. Somewhere behind us, I told myself. Ethan knew where we were. Somewhere, he saw a blinking dot inch away from the map of my life toward a strip of nowhere. I tightened my seatbelt until it pressed the breath out of me and looked straight ahead. I felt the old lesson rising, the one I'd learned without anyone naming it for me. When danger is polite, you have to listen harder. The rain was no longer weather, it was punishment. It slammed against the Mercedes like fists, a steady roar that made the cabin feel like a coffin. My father's hands rested calmly on the wheel, but his voice carried the venom of a verdict. "Do you know how pathetic you look today?" he asked. "Standing there with your childish slides, making me look weak? Do you think this company, my company, exists for your experiments?" My lips parted, but no sound came. My body knew what my mind refused to admit. This wasn't just anger, this was annihilation. "Your phone," he said. I stared, confused. "Why?" "Give it to me." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone carried decades of obedience drilled into me like nails. My hands shook as I placed the phone into his palm. He tucked it into his pocket like confiscating evidence. Wallet. Tears stung my eyes. Please don't. Wallet. His bark was a whip crack, so sharp the rain seemed to pause around us. I surrendered it. He didn't even look at me as he pocketed it, as if I were nothing more than an intern who had wasted his time. Then he reached into the glove box and held up a small GPS device, smiling the cruelest smile I'd ever seen. You think you can scheme behind my back? With Angela? With Harold? You think you're clever? His eyes glittered with triumph. I know every step you take. I've always known. Don't you understand? You are mine. A tremor of horror passed through me. This wasn't just control. It was surveillance. I had never belonged to myself. Get out, he said. The words hit harder than any slap. What? Get out. Father, it's pouring. He leaned closer, voice dripping with contempt. Then walk. 10 miles should be enough to teach you humility. Maybe by the time you crawl back, you'll remember your place. I searched his face for a shred of mercy. Instead, he twisted the knife. Your mother would be ashamed of you. Weak, useless, a disappointment. The air left my lungs. He knew her memory was all I had left, and he used it as a weapon. My hand fumbled for the door. He ripped my blazer from my shoulders, tossing it into the back seat. You won't be needing that. Comfort is for people who earn it. Then the door opened, and the storm swallowed me whole. Rain lashed my skin, turning silk to rags, heels to shackles. Within seconds I was drenched, my blouse clinging like a cruel second skin, my hair plastered over my face. My father watched for a moment, eyes flat as glass, before pulling the door shut. When you're ready to apologize, he said through the crack of the window, maybe I'll answer your call. If you can find a phone. The car jerked forward, tail lights glowing like embers in the storm until they vanished into nothing. And then silence. Not real silence. The kind of silence where only the rain speaks, pounding against the earth, drowning out every thought. My breath came ragged, every inhale catching on the lump in my throat. The world had emptied itself of witnesses. I was stripped of identity, no name, no money, no protection, no family. Just a drenched figure on a road that belonged to no one. My pumps sank into the mud with each step. The leather peeled, the heels bit into raw skin until I felt the hot sting of blisters tearing open. My teeth chattered so hard I tasted blood on my tongue. I hugged myself, but the cold cut through bone. I thought about how quickly society forgets you once you fall. How fast respect evaporates when you lose the symbols, phones, cars, credit cards, last names. In that moment, I wasn't Madison Hayes, daughter of Richard Hayes, heir to Hayes Development. I was just another woman abandoned in the rain, anonymous and invisible, walking until her body gave out. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes bled into hours, the rain washing away any sense of time. My legs screamed, my lungs burned, and still I stumbled forward, because stopping meant collapsing, and collapsing meant disappearing into the mud forever. And then headlights. They cut through the storm like a blade, too bright, too sudden. My heart clenched in terror. What if it was him, circling back to finish the lesson? The truck slowed, pulled over. A tall figure stepped out, backlit by the glow, rain pouring down his shoulders. It was Ethan Ward. My knees buckled with relief, a sob bursting from my chest. His presence was a miracle, a lifeline thrown into an ocean that had already claimed me. Miss Hayes, he said, voice steady as stone, though his eyes burned with fury. He stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around me, shielding me from the storm. In that moment, I collapsed against him, the weight of abandonment breaking free. My father had reduced me to nothing. Ethan reminded me I was still someone. Ethan's jacket was heavy across my shoulders, soaked at the edges but radiating a warmth that pierced through the cold. He guided me toward the truck without saying a word, his palm steady at my back, the kind of steady you don't argue with. Inside, the cab smelled faintly of leather and pine. The heater roared to life, fogging the windshield until the world outside became nothing but gray shadows. My body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering, breath coming in ragged bursts. Ethan didn't look at me with pity, only with a quiet intensity, as if cataloging every bruise the storm had left on me, visible and invisible. Here. He reached behind the seat and produced a duffel bag. Inside were sweatpants, a t-shirt, socks. Not designer, not fitted, just simple, dry. They're my sister's. Keep them. I almost laughed. My family's closets were filled with gowns that cost more than cars, yet the sight of cotton sweats in a duffel bag nearly undid me. You keep women's clothes in your truck? A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Prepared for emergencies, your uncle insisted. I froze. Uncle Sam? Ethan nodded, eyes still on the road as the truck pulled away from the shoulder. Before he passed, he asked me to watch you. Quietly. He was worried about how your father treated you after your mom died. My chest tightened. Memories of Samuel Montgomery rushed back, his booming laugh, the way he always slipped me extra dessert at family dinners, the quiet conversations where he told me not to let Richard crush my spirit. He knew, I whispered half to myself. He suspected, Ethan said. He told me, Madison will never see it coming because she loves too much. Someone has to stand guard for her. I turned toward the window, tears mixing with the rain that still streaked the glass. My uncle had been right. I had spent years trying to earn my father's approval, blind to the fact that I was bleeding for someone who would never see me as anything but a pawn. Ethan, my voice cracked. If you hadn't been there tonight— You don't need to finish that sentence, he interrupted gently. His tone was firm, like a soldier shutting down a battlefield scenario too dangerous to imagine. I pressed the towel to my face, drying the rain and the tears that wouldn't stop. My body was warming, but inside, a storm still raged. The betrayal wasn't new, it was cumulative, a lifetime of small knives that tonight had turned into a guillotine. And yet, sitting in Ethan's truck for the first time in years, I didn't feel entirely powerless. Your father took your phone? He asked, already knowing the answer. And my wallet. My voice shook with bitterness. He wanted me stripped of everything. No name, no help, just nothing. That. Ethan's jaw clenched, his knuckles tightening around the wheel. For a man who usually moved like shadow, his anger was a visible flame. That wasn't discipline, that was endangerment. A silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of the heater and the sweep of the wipers. Finally, Ethan reached into the console and handed me another phone. Sleek, unmarked. Secure line. Your uncle had me prepare it. Numbers already programmed, people you can trust. Yeah. I turned it over in my hands, stunned. Uncle Sam had thought of everything. He must have seen the cracks long before I admitted they were there. How long? I asked. How long have you been watching? 2 years. His eyes flicked toward me briefly. Documenting, protecting, waiting. Waiting for what? For tonight, he said simply. The weight of those words settled into me. Tonight was no accident, it was the inevitable explosion of years of control, cruelty, and silence. My father had tried to bury me in the rain. Instead, he had unearthed something far stronger. The truth. I pulled the sweatshirt over my damp blouse, letting its coarse fabric scratch against my skin. It didn't feel like weakness. It felt like armor. Where are we going? I asked, voice steadier now. A safe place, off the grid. He can't find you there. I studied Ethan's profile, the hard jaw, the steady eyes, the scars invisible but etched into the way he carried himself. He was a man who had seen war, and yet he was here, in this storm, guarding me against a different kind of battlefield. For the first time since my mother's funeral, I felt a flicker of safety. Not because the danger was gone, it wasn't, but because someone was finally standing beside me, not above me. I leaned back against the seat, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. As the truck cut through the storm, I realized something chilling. My father thought he had abandoned me. What he didn't know was that tonight, he had also freed me. The truck rolled into a quiet coastal town north of Boston just before midnight. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, but my body still carried its chill. Ethan parked in the underground garage of a discreet hotel tucked away from main roads. No Carter properties nearby. No familiar eyes, just brick walls, shadows, and anonymity. He guided me through a service entrance, every movement precise, purposeful. I felt like a fugitive. Maybe I was. The thought was equal parts terrifying and liberating. The suite he'd arranged was simple but elegant neutral tones, heavy curtains, the kind of place designed to be forgotten once you left. I peeled off the soaked clothes, leaving them to drip in the bathroom sink, and pulled on the sweatshirt and pants Ethan had given me. They hung loose. But for the first time in hours, I wasn't shivering. When I emerged, Ethan was on the phone, his voice low, clipped, efficient. He ended the call the moment he saw me. "She's on her way," he said. "Who?" "Kate Miller, your uncle's attorney, and now yours." I sank into the couch, exhaustion pressing against me like a tide. I didn't even know she existed. "You weren't supposed to," he replied, pulling a chair where he could see both me and the door. "Sam wanted someone in your corner if things ever crossed a line." A knock at the door startled me. Ethan moved instantly, checking the peephole before opening it. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, silver streaks through her dark hair, eyes sharp behind stylish glasses. She carried a leather briefcase like it was a weapon. "Miss Hayes," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. "I'm Kate Miller. Your uncle trusted me. I hope you will too." Something in her voice, steady, no nonsense, made me nod before I could second guess. "Please, call me Madison." She sat at the small dining table, setting down her briefcase. "Before we begin, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight, every detail." For 20 minutes, I recounted it all. The boardroom humiliation, the drive into nowhere, the confiscated phone, the words about my mother, the rain, the abandonment. My throat tightened more than once, but I forced the words out. Kate listened without interrupting, her pen scratching quietly across the page. When I finished, silence hung heavy. Kate set down her pen and looked me in the eye. "What your father did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. At minimum, reckless endangerment, more likely abuse with a documented pattern." The words landed like thunder. Criminal. Abuse. Someone else naming what I had lived with all these years. "Ethan?" Kate asked. He nodded. "Dashcam footage. Location data. And audio. If needed." Kate allowed herself a small smile. "Good. That will matter." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder bound in blue legal paper. "There's something else you need to know. Your uncle left provisions in place in case your father ever crossed a line. That line has been crossed." My pulse quickened. "Provisions?" "Your mother," Kate said carefully, "maintained assets separate from your father. Investments, accounts, property. At her death, they should have transferred to you." I stared. "That can't be right. My father told me everything was joint." He lied. Kate slid documents across the table. "The records are clear. Your mother left you assets valued at roughly $28 million. Your father, as executor, never disclosed them. He has been using them, illegally." The room tilted. My hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. My mother had left me freedom, and I had never known. All those nights I stayed late at the office, desperate for scraps of approval, when I could have walked away. All the control, the punishments, the lectures, it was built on a lie. "It's fraud," Kate said simply. "Breach of trust, conversion of assets, potentially criminal charges, but there's more." She opened another folder. "Your uncle, Samuel, held shares in Hayes Development 8%. Upon his death, those should have transferred to you. Your father concealed it. Combined with the shares your mother left you, you actually own 51%. You are the majority shareholder." The words struck like a lightning bolt. Majority shareholder. Me. For years, I had felt like a guest in my father's empire, tolerated but never welcomed. And all along, the keys had been mine. He had stolen them, hidden them, used my own inheritance to keep me chained. Ethan's voice broke through my shock. "He's been holding her hostage, financially, emotionally, professionally, all to keep control." Kate nodded. "Exactly. But now the leverage shifts. We'll move in phases. First, secure the evidence. Second, confront him with witnesses. Third, initiate proceedings to restore your control. I pressed a trembling hand against my mouth. Tonight I had been stripped of everything, left alone to walk miles in the storm. And here, only hours later, I was being told I had the power to strip everything from him. The irony was so sharp it felt like glass in my chest. Kate leaned forward. Madison, your father thinks you're broken tonight. Let him. That illusion will be our weapon. Tomorrow, we take the first step. Though. Her eyes met mine, unwavering, and for the first time in years, I didn't see myself as the girl who was always left in the rain. I saw myself as someone rising out of it. The drive back to Boston felt like descending into a battlefield. Ethan parked 2 blocks from the mansion, his eyes hard, jaw clenched. He handed me a small silver pendant on a chain, delicate enough to pass for jewelry. Wear this, he said. What is it? Recorder, military grade, undetectable by standard sweepers. Every word he says tonight, every threat, every slip will be evidence. The pendant felt cool against my skin, but it burned with a secret weight. For years, my father had forced me to perform for him, to dance in chains. Tonight I would perform again, but this time every word would be a nail in his coffin. Ethan cupped my shoulder before I stepped out. Remember, let him think he's won. Fear is your disguise now. I nodded, though my heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it. Then I walked the last stretch alone, rain-damp pavement glistening under the glow of our driveway lamps. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows blazing like eyes watching my every step. The home I had grown up in, tennis courts, sweeping lawns, chandeliers looked less like comfort now, more like a gilded prison. I pushed the heavy door open. The sound echoed like a verdict. My father was waiting in the living room, glass of 18-year scotch in hand, his reading glasses perched low as he reviewed documents I now suspected were stained with theft. He looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ah, Madison, he said smoothly. I trust your little adventure in humility was instructive. The pendant at my throat recorded every syllable. I lowered my head, forcing my shoulders to slump, my voice to shrink. Yes, Father. That. His gaze swept over me, pausing on the borrowed sweatshirt, the damp hair. His lips curled in faint disgust. Where did you get those clothes? A kind stranger helped me, I said softly, as rehearsed. Lucky girl, he murmured, sipping his drink. Then, after a pause, sit. I obeyed, taking the chair opposite him. The dining table stretched between us like a battlefield line. Mahogany polished to a cruel shine. 2 plates were set, but the distance was deliberate, 10 feet of air thick with control. Dinner was silent at first, except for the clink of cutlery and the hollow thud of my heart. Then he began his lecture, voice smooth, condescending, as if reading from scripture. You must understand, Madison, he said, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. That family loyalty is not optional. It is absolute. Your little stunt in the boardroom undermining me in front of the board was unacceptable. Bine. I kept my eyes lowered, every nerve screaming. Yes, Father. You are not ready for executive responsibility. Tomorrow I will announce your transfer to community relations, a softer department, more suited to your temperament. My nails dug crescents into my palms beneath the table. The pendant at my neck captured the words, every condescending syllable. Whatever you think is best, I said, hating myself for how meek it sounded. That's my girl. His smile gleamed like a knife. These lessons may seem harsh, but they're necessary. The world is cruel, Madison. I am preparing you for it. One day you will thank me. Inside, rage howled like a storm, but my face showed nothing. I nodded, lips trembling just enough to sell the illusion. When dessert was finished, I asked quietly, May I be excused? He waved a hand magnanimously. Of course. Rest well. Tomorrow is a new beginning for us. A kiss on his cheek, something I hadn't done willingly in years, sealed the performance. He stiffened, then relaxed, satisfied. Upstairs in my room, I locked the door, peeled off the sweatshirt, and clutched the pendant in my fist. My chest heaved, tears finally spilling. the humiliation of pretending submission, of bowing to the man who had left me to die in the rain, cut deeper than any storm. But beneath the pain, a fire burned. Every word he'd spoken tonight was no longer his weapon. It was mine. Evidence, proof. I texted Ethan a single line from the burner phone he had given me. Recordings secured. His reply came instantly. Good. Hold steady. Tomorrow we move. I stared at the ceiling, the crystal chandelier above my bed refracting fragments of light. For years I had felt crushed beneath its glittering weight, like a prisoner locked in beauty. Tonight, the light looked different. Not like a cage, but like shards of glass I was ready to turn into blades. Tomorrow, Richard Hayes would stand in a room full of power and realize that the daughter he thought broken was carrying the truth like a sword. Morning broke with skies too bright, as if mocking the storm that had raged only hours before. I dressed deliberately, slipping into a simple black sheath dress that fit like armor. My hair was pinned tight, my face bare of anything except resolve. Today was the day the game shifted. Richard left the mansion at 8:15 sharp, chauffeured as always. I waited 30 minutes before following in my own car, pendant still hanging around my neck like a loaded gun. When I pulled into the underground garage, Ethan was already waiting, leaning against a pillar with that quiet alertness that made people underestimate him until it was too late. Beside him stood Kate Miller, briefcase in hand, her expression sharp as a blade. Angela Brooks was there too, her normally calm face set in grim determination. Harold Thompson joined moments later, walking with the measured stride of someone about to witness a reckoning he had prayed for years would come. "Ready?" Kate asked, handing me a leather portfolio filled with documents we'd prepared overnight. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. I've been ready for 5 years. Together, we took the executive elevator to the 30th floor. Inside the glass-walled boardroom, Richard Hayes was in his element, standing at the head of the table. His voice carried, clipped and authoritative, as he addressed the 7 members of the executive committee. As such, effective immediately, Madison will be reassigned to community relations, a department more appropriate for her skills and temperament. The words rolled off his tongue with smug satisfaction. He hadn't noticed the door opening behind him. When I stepped in, flanked by Kate, Angela, and Harold, the room shifted. Conversations faltered. Richard's head turned, his expression first confused, then hardening into ice. What is the meaning of this interruption? His gaze locked on me, eyes narrowing. "Madison, this is an executive meeting. You are not welcome here." I met his stare without flinching. My voice came steady, deliberate. "On the contrary, Father, this meeting concerns me more than anyone. You might want to sit down." For perhaps the first time in his life, Richard Hayes looked momentarily speechless. That sliver of hesitation was all I needed. "I apologize for the intrusion," I said, turning to address the committee. "But matters have come to light that affect the future of Hayes' development and its leadership." Richard's hand slammed against the table. "This is outrageous. Security—" "Robert." Harold's voice cut through, calm but firm. "As senior board member, I authorized her presence. Sit down." Murmurs rippled around the table. Richard's jaw clenched, but slowly, reluctantly, he lowered himself into his chair. His glare could have burned steel. Kate stepped forward, distributing copies of documents from the portfolio. "These records," I began, my voice rising with each word, "detail the misappropriation of assets belonging to my mother, Evelyn Hayes. $28 million, siphoned away by Robert Hayes under the guise of estate management." The committee members flipped through the papers, eyes widening as they absorbed the numbers. Gasps, whispers, shifting in seats, the sound of power wobbling. "This is absurd," Richard barked, his face flushed crimson. "Madison is confused. These are standard procedures." Angela interrupted, her voice razor-sharp. "I reviewed these records personally. They are not standard procedures. They are fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Criminal. Robert." The room buzzed with shock. I stepped closer to the table, pulling the pendant from around my neck. "If that isn't enough," I said, my fingers trembling only slightly as I pressed a small button. "Perhaps you'd like to hear it from Robert himself." The the room filled with his voice, crisp and unmistakable. These lessons may seem harsh, but they're necessary. One day you'll thank me. Gasps rose again, but I didn't stop. Another clip. Your phone, Madison. Your wallet, too. A little discomfort builds character. Bwah. And finally, the most damning. When you're ready to apologize and remember your place, you can call me. If you can find a phone. Each word sliced through the room like lightning. Board members turned, eyes wide with disgust, disbelief, dawning realization. Richard surged to his feet, face twisted in rage. This is manipulation, she's twisting. Before he could finish, the door opened and Ethan stepped in. His calm presence filled the room like a shadow. That's enough, Mr. Hayes. His voice was low, firm, military. Every word, every action, has been documented. For 2 years. Richard's eyes widened in recognition. You. His voice dripped venom. The shadow in the corner. The tracker. That's right, Ethan said simply. I was hired by Samuel Montgomery to protect Madison from you. The name of my uncle struck like a hammer. The committee erupted in whispers. My father's empire of intimidation cracked under the weight of truth. Kate's voice cut through the chaos. Effective immediately, Madison Hayes asserts her rightful authority as majority shareholder. With Evelyn Hayes's and Samuel Montgomery's combined shares, she holds 51%. She is the controlling voice of this company. The room erupted. Shocked exclamations, papers rustling, heads turning. Richard's fists slammed on the table. But for once, no one rushed to defend him. I met his furious glare, my voice quiet but sharper than any shout. You spent years teaching me lessons about power. Tonight, I'm teaching you one. Never start a fight you're not prepared to lose. Silence fell. The board members looked between us, realization dawning that the balance had shifted forever. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing in the rain. I was the storm. The boardroom still smelled of shock when Richard was escorted out. His fists clenched, his shoulders rigid, but for the first time in his life, his authority wasn't absolute. I watched him disappear behind the glass doors, his empire slipping through his fingers, and I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Kate touched my arm lightly. Phase 2 is complete. Now we prepare for the legal war. Her voice was steady, but I heard the warning under it. This was only the beginning. Angela and Harold exchanged glances, then both looked at me. Angela spoke first. You did well, Madison. Very well. But don't underestimate him. Men like Richard don't lose quietly. Harold nodded grimly. He built this company with blood and iron. He will fight tooth and claw to keep even the illusion of control. Their words pressed against my chest like a weight. I knew they were right. My father didn't just love control, he was control. To strip it from him was like stripping the skin from bone. He wouldn't survive without trying to take it back. Later that afternoon, I stood outside the CEO's office, the same office where he had ruled for decades, where decisions worth millions had been signed with a flick of his pen. The plaque with his name had already been removed. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. Ethan was beside me, silent as always, but his presence was grounding. You're not walking into his shadow anymore, he said quietly. This is yours now. I nodded, pushing the door open. The room was familiar and alien all at once. Dark mahogany furniture, shelves lined with awards and photos of Richard shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, people who had flattered his ego for decades. The air still carried his cologne, sharp and suffocating. I crossed the room, every step an act of defiance, and lowered myself into the leather chair behind the desk. The chair swallowed me at first, oversized, intimidating, but then it settled around me, as if acknowledging a new master. From this height, the Boston skyline stretched across the windows, glass towers gleaming in the afternoon sunday. The view my father had used to remind me of my smallness now felt different. It didn't diminish me. It challenged me. For a moment, my throat tightened. I thought of my mother Evelyn, how she would have stood here, gentle hands smoothing the chaos my father always carried. She had believed in compassion, in strength that didn't require cruelty. Sitting here, I felt closer to her than I had in years. Feels heavy, doesn't it? Kate's voice pulled me back. She stood in the doorway, folder in hand. Like wearing a crown made of iron, I admitted. She gave a small smile. That's leadership. Now let's talk strategy. Thus, she spread documents across the desk. Financial records, estate papers, evidence of fraud. Phase 3 will be brutal. He'll try everything: delays, countersuits, smear campaigns. But the law is on your side. And so is the truth. I stared at the pages, each one proof of betrayal. My father hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my freedom, my future, my mother's final gift to me. Each document was both a wound and a weapon. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes never leaving me. He'll come after you personally. He won't accept losing to you in public. Be ready. A shiver ran through me. My father had already left me to die once. What would stop him from trying again? I looked down at my hands resting on the desk. They weren't shaking anymore. Let him come, I said quietly. I'm done being afraid. Silence filled the office, thick but electric. For the first time, I felt the shift not just in the company but inside myself. The girl who once begged for approval was gone. What sat here now was someone forged in storms, sharpened by betrayal. That evening, when the building emptied, I lingered in the office. Alone, I traced the edges of my father's old awards, the frames of his photographs. Each one felt like a ghost of who he wanted me to be: obedient, malleable, silent. I lifted one photo of him shaking hands with the mayor and set it face down. Then another, and another. One by one, I erased his presence until the walls were bare. In their place, I imagined new images: green initiatives, sustainable projects, foundations built not on control but on purpose. My vision, not his. The city lights flickered on outside, casting the office in gold. I whispered into the empty room. Words meant for my father, though he would never hear them. You tried to bury me. You forgot I was a seed. When I finally left, Ethan was waiting by the elevator. He didn't ask how it felt. He didn't need to. He just fell into step beside me, a silent sentinel. Tomorrow would bring lawsuits, headlines, endless battles. But tonight, I carried a strange, fragile peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving Richard Hayes. I was becoming Madison Hayes. 6 months later, the view from the corner office hadn't changed. The Boston Harbor still glittered with glass towers. Cranes swung lazily across the skyline, and the city still hummed like it always had. But inside Hayes Development, everything was different. The mahogany walls had been replaced with lighter wood, photographs of Richard shaking hands with governors stripped away. In their place hung renderings of Carter Green projects: rooftop gardens, solar facades, community centers built on reclaimed land. Our fastest-growing division wasn't another glass skyscraper, it was sustainability. But success didn't mean peace. Every morning, newspapers landed on my desk with headlines that stung like slaps. Reckless heiress endangers Hayes legacy. Power grab or progress. Anonymous op-eds painted me as impulsive, too emotional, a child playing CEO. Richard's voice wasn't on the bylines, but his fingerprints were everywhere. He had launched lawsuits: 2 counterclaims, defamation suits, endless filings designed to bleed me dry with time and money. He even hired private investigators, leaking carefully curated scandals to gossip columns. The same man who had once told me appearances were everything now tried to bury me under poisoned appearances of his own. Angela Brooks walked into my office one morning with fresh reports. Her expression was tight, jaw clenched. He's paying off people inside. Staff loyal to him. We've already lost 2 mid-level directors to his orbit. I gripped the edge of my desk. Betrayal cut deeper than lawsuits. I could fight the outside world but rot inside the walls. That was war on another level. Ethan appeared in the doorway, quiet as always, though his eyes scanned the room like a soldier entering hostile ground. We'll find them, he said simply. No leak is invisible forever. But it wasn't just leaks, it was pressure. The weight of being both heir and rebel. Clients hesitated, partners whispered, and every decision felt like balancing on glass. One night, exhausted after 14 hours of meetings, I stayed in the office alone. Papers were spread across the desk, contracts dotted with red ink, financial projections that blurred in my vision. My hands shook as I pressed them to my temples. Was I truly building something new, or was I just rearranging pieces of his empire doomed to collapse under his shadow? The door opened softly. Ethan stepped in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one beside me, then leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You haven't eaten in 12 hours, he said. I let out a shaky laugh. "I'm too busy defending myself from ghosts." "Not ghosts," he corrected. "A man who can't stand losing control." I stared out the window at the city lights. "He's everywhere, Ethan. In the papers, in the boardroom whispers, in my own nightmares. I win one battle, and he finds another way to claw back." He studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, "That's because he knows your greatest weapon isn't the company. It's you. And you're still here." Something in his tone anchored me, pulled me back from the spiral. For years I had lived under my father's gaze, shrinking to fit inside his approval. Now, even when he threw everything at me, I was still standing. That had to mean something. Days later, at a board session, the fractures showed again. Victor Huang, the ever-neutral, suddenly voiced concerns about overcommitting to untested markets. His tone was smooth, professional, but his eyes flicked toward me with the faintest glint of malice. I knew then, my father's money had reached him. Kate Miller leaned forward sharply, cutting through his arguments with precision. "These aren't experiments, Victor. They're sound investments, already backed by major clients. You know this." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Whispers spread, heads turned. I could feel the old tide rising, the familiar weight of my father's control pressing into the cracks he had carved over decades. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone had gone. The silence was suffocating. I pulled my mother's old fountain pen from a drawer, the one Ethan had found among her belongings, and held it between my fingers. Evelyn Hayes had fought her battle quietly, in the margins of Richard's empire. She had left me more than money, she had left me a legacy of defiance. I whispered into the empty room, "I won't let him take this from me. Not again." The next morning, I announced a bold new project, a flagship Carter Green development on prime Boston land, one my father had always coveted but never secured. The risk was high, the investment staggering. But I knew it would silence the whispers if we succeeded. Reporters swarmed. Headlines doubled. Richard filed another injunction. But when I stood at the podium, unveiling the renderings of a gleaming, sustainable complex that would redefine the skyline, I saw something flicker in the crowd. Not doubt, not suspicion, hope. And for the first time in 6 months, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could win. The summons arrived like a blade slipped under a door. Emergency board session, attendance mandatory. I knew before I even saw the signature, Richard Hayes was making his move. The boardroom buzzed when I walked in. Faces I thought I could trust looked away. Whispers snaked through the air. And there he was, Richard seated at the head of the table as if nothing had changed, his posture rigid, his smile venomous. Beside him sat a man in a navy suit, crisp and smug, his new attorney. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, voice carrying with practiced authority, "we gather today to correct a grave mistake. My daughter, though I hesitate to use the term, has manipulated this board, stolen documents, and fabricated evidence in a reckless bid for control. I present to you proof." The attorney slid binders across the table. Inside, doctored bank statements, forged emails, fabricated memos suggesting I had siphoned company funds for personal luxuries, trips I had never taken, accounts that didn't exist. Gasps rippled through the room. Harold's face paled. Angela slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd." Richard's smile widened. "Absurd? Or illuminating? The girl you've placed in power is nothing but a fraud. A spoiled child dressed in CEO clothes." He turned his gaze to me, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Tell me, Madison, how does it feel to finally be exposed?" The room spun. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. His words clawed at old wounds. The ones that whispered, I wasn't enough. Never enough. My fingers curled into fists, nails biting my palms. Kate rose, her voice sharp. These documents are fabrications, easily disproven. Richard's attorney smirked. We welcome scrutiny. But while investigations drag on, the damage is done. Hayes Development cannot afford a thief at its helm. The board murmured in agreement. I felt the tide turning against me, heavy and merciless. Richard leaned back in his chair, victorious. Step down, Madison. Spare yourself the humiliation. For a heartbeat, I almost faltered. Almost. The humiliation was suffocating. The betrayal unbearable. But then I caught Ethan's eyes across the room. Steady. Unwavering. And I remembered the storm, the rain lashing my skin, my father's voice telling me I was nothing. I had survived that. I would survive this. I stood, my voice trembling at first but rising with each word. You want to talk about fraud, Father? Let's talk about fraud. Let's talk about fraud. Let's talk about fraud. Kate handed me a folder. I slid copies across the table. Here are the original bank records. Unaltered. Direct from First Federal. Verified yesterday. Compare them to the forgeries in your hands. Spot the difference. Board members bent over the pages. Whispers shifted. And if that's not enough, I continued, pulling the pendant recorder from around my neck. Perhaps the board would like to hear the unedited recordings from the night you abandoned me in the storm. That. Gasps filled the room as his own voice spilled into the air. When you're ready to apologize, maybe I'll answer your call, if you can find a phone. Every syllable was a dagger. Faces turned, horrified. Even Victor Huang, the most neutral, looked shaken. Richard surged to his feet, face contorted with rage. She manipulates. She lies. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and steady. 2 years of documentation, audio, video, witnesses. Samuel Montgomery anticipated this. He made sure the truth would survive you. Kate added the final strike. And here are court filings prepared this morning. Fraud, embezzlement, abuse of fiduciary duty. We are pressing charges, Richard. You no longer have the power to bully this room. The board erupted. Papers rustled. Voices rose. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief. Amid the chaos, Richard's face twisted into something feral. Eyes, bloodshot, lips curled in a snarl. You ungrateful child, he spat, pointing at me with shaking hands. I made you. Everything you are exists because of me. Without me, you are nothing. The words, once my chains, now felt hollow. I straightened, shoulders back, voice ringing clear. No, Father. Everything I am is in spite of you. Silence fell. The board members stared, the truth hanging heavy between us. Harold rose slowly, voice grave. Effective immediately, Richard Hayes is suspended from all duties, pending investigation. Angela added firmly. Control remains with Madison Hayes, majority shareholder, CEO. The gavel fell figurative but deafening. Richard's chair scraped violently against the floor as he lunged toward me, fury radiating off him like fire. But Ethan was there in an instant, blocking his path with a wall of muscle and calm authority. Don't, he said simply. Richard's breath came in ragged gasps. For the first time, I saw not a titan of industry, not the man who had towered over me my whole life. I saw a broken tyrant, stripped of his illusions, clawing at the power slipping through his fingers. Security entered. He fought them, shouting curses, promises of revenge, but they dragged him from the room. His voice echoed down the hall, fading but furious. The board sat in stunned silence. Then, one by one, their gazes turned to me. Not with pity, not with doubt, with something new. Respect. I sank back into my chair, trembling with exhaustion, tears stinging my eyes. For years, I had been his shadow. Tonight, I had finally stepped into the light. And though the battle wasn't over, One truth blazed clear. Richard Hayes had underestimated the daughter he tried to break. The trial was not the spectacle my father had envisioned for himself, but it became the one he could not escape. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted his name, microphones lunged like bayonets, and for the first time in his career, Richard Hayes had no polished statement, no choreographed smile, only shackles and silence. The charges were staggering: fraud, embezzlement, abuse of fiduciary duty. Kate Miller stood at my side through every hearing, unflinching, while Ethan loomed quietly nearby, a sentinel who never wavered. Evidence poured in: bank records, recorded conversations, testimony from staff who finally found the courage to speak. Piece by piece, the empire he had built on fear unraveled in public view. I sat in the gallery the day the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. The words struck the courtroom like thunder. Richard's face remained stone, but his eyes flicked toward me, burning with the same contempt he had hurled my whole life. Yet this time, the look didn't pierce me. It slid off like rain against glass. Because I wasn't standing in his storm anymore. I was the sky above it. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs stung my eyes. They wanted a statement, a soundbite to match the headlines. I gave them one sentence. The truth has a way of surviving lies. And then I walked away. 6 months later, Hayes' development was unrecognizable. The Carter Green flagship project broke ground with a celebration that filled the city square. Children planted trees where my father had once imagined steel pylons. Community leaders cut ribbons alongside me. Not politicians currying favor, but ordinary people who believed in what we were building. The boardroom no longer felt like a battlefield. Angela managed finances with quiet brilliance. Harold guided with wisdom, and even Victor, once a wavering ally, had settled into genuine support. The company wasn't just profitable, it had purpose. Some nights I stayed late in the CEO's office, staring at the skyline. The same view my father had used as a throne now felt like a horizon. Not an empire to rule, but a future to create. At home, I still carried scars. Nights when rain against the windows dragged me back to that roadside, soaked and abandoned. Mornings when I caught myself bracing for a voice that wasn't there anymore. Healing, I learned, isn't a switch. It's a season. But each day I survived it. Each choice I made for myself was a victory. One evening, Ethan found me on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand. The city stretched below us, alive with lights. "You did it," he said simply. I shook my head. "Number. We did it. Uncle Sam, Kate, Angela, Harold, you. Without you, I would have drowned." His eyes softened, rare for a man built of steel. "You didn't drown, Madison. You learned how to breathe underwater. That's harder." The words lodged deep, a truth I hadn't been ready to name. Months later, I visited my mother's grave. I brought lilies, her favorite, and sat in the quiet. "Mom," I whispered, tracing her name on the stone. "I wish you could see it. The company, the projects, me." My throat tightened. "He tried to bury me, he almost did. But you left me the strength I didn't know I had, and now, I'm free." La. The wind rustled through the trees, soft and steady, as if she were answering back. The final board meeting of the year ended with applause. Profits up, projects thriving, reputation restored. But more than numbers, the company felt alive again. I closed the session, words ringing not just for the board, but for myself. "We are no longer a company built on fear," I said. "We are a company built on vision, on people, on resilience. The storm is behind us. The future is ours." When the gavel fell, I felt something shift inside me. A chapter closing. That night, walking alone through Boston's streets lit with holiday lights, I thought back to the girl I once was, the one who begged for approval at boardroom tables, who froze at her father's voice, who walked miles in the rain stripped of everything. She was gone. In her place stood Madison Hayes, not an heiress, not a pawn, a survivor, a leader. A woman who had learned that sometimes, the only way to win against cruelty is not to become cruel yourself, but to outlast it, outshine it, and rise from it. And as snow began to fall lightly on the cobblestones, I let myself smile, not because the war was easy, not because the scars were gone, but because I was still here, still standing, still free.